Hello, and welcome to the holiday edition of ConTinual's Short Takes reading series. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and I'll be your host for today's sampler of some of your favorite writers, both those you know and those you're about to meet. Reading for us tonight are Jason Graves, Alledria Hurt, Jenny Koch, Jennifer R. Povey, and me. First up, we have author, editor, illustrator, publisher. Jason Graves is the author of 4 novels and 2 published short stories. He is the publisher of Perspective Press, which he founded in 2015. Learn more at www.jasontgraves.net and www.perspectivepress.com.
Reading from my novel Gretchen Third, and this is a part that I take out of the middle of the novel. The chapter is called An Eternity of Dust. The sun never rises in hell, but I must. Clawing my way to wakefulness, after mere minutes of restless rest, I rise. Dust, heat, and damp are the only constants swirling in the darkness. Those and the blanched figures that move through the swirl. For hours upon hours, aside from the scarred and dented back end of the cart before me, these are the only things I see: dust and ghosts. Ghosts with whips. I step into my dank leather harness and lift the heavy chains, awaiting the command to pull. And heave! Throwing my weight forward, my muscles strain against the cart, heavy laden, which follows hard on my heels. The harness of troll leather creaks, only barely more than the joints of my knees. Legs stretched, rising up on toes like a cat, nails scraping stone, digging in for leverage. This is the hardest part. The muscle fibers squeezing, pulling against the iron basket of dead earth. Shoddy wheels refusing to turn on rusty axles. The part we all dread. All of us who pull the ore carts through the forever night. Ore to make the metal, metal to make the weapons, weapons to fight the angels. I shake my head and try not to think of anything other than my feet, digging in and pulling me forward. It is work to get the cart started again. Hard work, but we don't complain. The rest before the struggle was worth it. The welcomed collapse of our walking corpses onto the cool stone floor, our bodies pushed too far for far too long. A whip cracks, a voice raised in disgust. Not at me, but close. The squeal of metal fills my ears, and my body tilts ahead, the cart moving at last. I reach in and push out. Lift a leg coated in grit and sweat and filth, plant it, ignoring the tiny stones that bruise my already bruised flesh, and strain. Slimy leather digs into my skin and pushes on muscle, resisting my effort. Work, inertia, physics. Damn it! My throat, raw, already burns from the shout. There used to be ideas in my head, grand thoughts of science and art, comfort and love. Now, it's just darkness and rot and ow! The whip takes me by surprise. I don't even bother looking at the wraith, for the cart rolls now, gaining momentum. But even so, the whip finds my skin again, not enough to cause damage, but the lash still stings. Silence! The wraith hovers on the edge of sight before moving off up the line of carts. It seems right that the Sililiv, or their avatars at least, should be the demons of hell, but wrong that I should have ended up here under their sway. My anger burns at the wraith, tongue rising, my lips part for the words that I want to utter, the curse I want to bear. But silence rules my voice. My head stays down. I pull. Time passes, and I sense another wraith, this one keeping pace in half steps. I wait for the harsh words, the whip. Gretchen Third. The wraith whispers my name. Chains rattle and clink as I turn my head as far as my collar and crown will allow. Sidelong, I regard the tall, slender smudge of pale Ellie flesh. Do I know you? The words slip from my tongue and tumble like falling stones, more a monotonous grating sound than the lyrical voice I used to hear when I parted my lips. There is so little left of me. I'm just a husk, forever pulling carts full of earth flesh through the false night. I want a better death.
Thank you, Jason. And where can people find Gretchen Third?
It's all over. It's on Amazon. You can order it through bookstores. I don't have a copy of it with me, but this is another novel that I wrote, The Alewife.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They can also find it at the address you gave earlier, www.perspectivepress.com.
Okay, great. Okay, next up, we have Alledria Hurt. Alledria Hurt is an African-American speculative fiction writer in multiple genres. Best known for her work in fantasy and horror. Her most recent work is Alice, a zombie novel with a twist. Learn more at www.alledriahurt.com.
Alice, Chapter 1, 13th Street. No normal person runs like that. Sunset. Ethan hated the pumpkin orange glow for how it made everything harder to see. Truthfully, sunset made Ethan nervous. Maybe it was the zombies. Ethan reached up to wipe sweat from his forehead. He'd been hiding in the 13th Street bus for most of the day. It wouldn't move because the back axle was broken, but it made a good lookout spot. It was close enough to the ground to make getting down into the tunnels easy, but high enough the murder couldn't get him if he climbed to the top. What he would do once he got to the top, he couldn't say, but that was the escape plan if he should ever become trapped and unable to get out the door. Ethan's eyes burned with fatigue. They creeped around more in the night, but that didn't mean they were like bats or owls. Zombies didn't need to sleep. They didn't need to shit or anything except feed. With a far quicker motion than brushing away the sweat, Ethan adjusted his scope. The first one shuffled into view. Things had two speeds, the slow shuffle of traditional zombies or the Olympic sprint of the ravenous. Their usual was the slow shuffle, conserving energy to chase down dinner. Once they knew food was nearby, they ran and could run for a long time. Ethan had never seen anyone outrun a zombie. A number of people had tried. The quote went, "Death was swift." They moved like geese, a slowly widening V formation forcing things before it. At least that was what he normally saw. But ahead of him, this murder moved oddly. Shifting his scope again, he keyed in on the disturbance. Something ran through the group. Ethan adjusted his scope again. That couldn't be right. Nothing ran through a murder. He still had time before they were close enough to scent him. Eager for a better view, he crawled out the window and on top of the bus. He laid out flat and tried to get a bead on things from his new position. A person ran through the zombies, carrying someone else. The zombies behind chased them. The ones in front hadn't turned around to the humans racing toward them. It was weird. The fact only half of the murders seemed to know what was going on only made things much stranger. Hey, Ethan didn't bother with his signal code before talking to his teammates. You seeing this? Oak Avenue 101 confirms, Rogers said. He stuck with the proper protocol. An old hat no use for those who let their training go because of excitement. Unknown running through the murder seems to be a normal person. No normal person runs like that, Ethan said. Agreed. Roger's response left him wondering if the old man was going to shoot at the runner. The first shot went off. The runner suddenly jigged to the right, putting herself in a zombie's reach. It grabbed her jacket. Without losing her car, snatched free and vaulted over the top of the zombie in front of her. Then she skipped from one shoulder to the next, walking on the shuffling bodies before their running brethren could knock them over. Another shot split the air, and Ethan about swallowed his tongue when once again it missed. Yes, Ethan said. Dale interjected into the conversation. She was stationed just past Roger's position. She's fast. Think she's on our side? If she's not, you think it will matter? Roger's pragmatic response threw a bucket of cold water on Ethan's enthusiasm. Good point, both Ethan and Dale admitted in unison. Headed straight for your position, Spotter, Dale said. Not that anyone thought those creatures out there could remember who they dealt with from one second to the next. Handles were just one of the leavovers from having the former military types running reality. They seemed to have this need to label positions rather than people, and to call daily things Operation Stay Alive. The mission name really was not inspiring at all, in Ethan's opinion. I can see that, really. Dale, I can, Ethan said, forcing his breath past his thudding heart. Then, with a motion he'd only seen on television back when the NBA playoffs were a big deal, she jumped and landed on top of the bus. Even Jordan didn't have ups like that. She placed her passenger down next to him and said, "Watch him." With that, she dropped off the side. Alice. Horror encapsulated in one word. The man she left behind held his arms out to her. It disturbed Ethan. He'd seen looks of fear like the man's before, but only on children. This guy was not a child. Alice, he called her again. Shut up, James, the woman called back. Ethan heard her clear over the moaning and groaning of the now running dead. They didn't need air to make noise, but then again, they didn't need air to run either. The zombie stink hung thick in the air. There was no getting used to it because it was always fresh and pungent. Ethan once thought they would eventually stop stinking, but that wasn't the case with the walking dead. The sound of bones breaking interrupted Ethan's thoughts. He peeked over the side of the bus to spy Alice killing zombies with her bare hands. Its were quick, intended to kill more than one creature at a time. Shoving skulls together, using one body to break another. He even saw her reach through a chest cavity and pull a spine through the front before using it as a whip on the next one. It was amazing. Spotter, what the hell do we do? Should we shoot with her in the zone? Asked Roger. Ethan looked to James, who heard the question. Their eyes met. It was then Ethan noticed James's eyes were mismatched brown and blue. They were clear and lucid. Then he shook his head. Yes, take your shots as you find them, Ethan said. They couldn't let the murder get away. They would make more. Minutes stretched as they always did in firefights. The murder consisted of about 100 lost souls, formerly family members and productive members of society. By the time the last one finished twitching, the sun had set and the moon had yet to rise.
Thank you very much, Alledria. Where can folks find Alice?
Alice came out at the beginning of October. It's available through Mocha Memoirs Press and is available on Amazon.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Next up, we have Gini Koch. Gini Koch writes the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Daw Books and a multiplicity of stories in all lengths and genres under a variety of pen names, including G.J. Koch, Anita Ensel, Gemma Chase, A.E. Stanton, and J.C. Koch. Learn more at www.ginnykoch.com.
Hi, I'm going to be reading tonight from the book that gave me my career, which is the first book in the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series, Touched by an Alien. What gets me is that in all the comic books and movies and even novels, whenever someone gets superpowers, there's at least an 80% likelihood they'll use said powers for good. It's always some man or woman of science looking for a cure for the world's ills who gets hit with the gamma rays, or an outcast kid who happens to have a wise oldster around to show him the ropes as soon as his mutation hits. The few bad guys who turn superpowered always have some fatal flaw that renders them easy pickings for the good guys, who also manage to outnumber the baddies every time it matters. In real life, of course, it never works that way at all. In real life, there are no superheroes. Of course, this doesn't mean there are no super beings. But never fear, I'm on it. Yeah, it doesn't sound all that comforting to me either. Chapter 1. My first super being was an accident, literally and figuratively. I was walking from the courthouse to the parking garage. Jury duty was over. I'd been released early, right after the lunch break, so I was free to go back to work and try to catch up on my missed half a day. The parking garage was across the street, so I had to wait for the light. As I stood there hoping I wouldn't sunburn, I witnessed a small fender bender. One slow-moving car rear-ended another right in front of the courthouse, about 50 feet away from me. The drivers got out, man from the front car, woman from the rear, and he started yelling at her immediately. At first, I figured he was raging because he'd been hit, and the start of summer in Arizona always makes everyone here a little crazy. But I could hear him, and it dawned on me that this was his wife. She was apologizing, but he wasn't having any of it, so she got mad too. Their fight escalated into shouting in a matter of moments. This was a full-on domestic dispute, the kind the cops rightly want nothing to do with. The light changed, and I wondered if I should just head across the street to avoid getting involved with these two when it happened. The man's rage went supernova, and all of a sudden, he sprouted wings out of his back. I'm not talking little wings either. They were huge, easily 6.5 feet high, and I guess the span is double. They had feathers, but they were odd-looking, which I know you'd figure would be a given in the first place. But they didn't look like bird feathers. They gleamed, and not with blood. There was a viscous substance on them, and as I watched, the man turned towards his horrified, screaming wife and shot blades out of the feathers that lunges to ribbons in a matter of seconds. And he turned towards the courthouse and let more blades fly. The main Pueblo Caliente courthouse, a 9-story building with mostly glass walls, was built a few years ago and was really very modern and attractive, doing its best to pretend the city hadn't once been a pioneer cow town. I flinched as the projectiles hit. Glass shattered and flew everywhere. The courthouse went from sleep to rubble in a matter of moments. I could hear screams. The people coming out of the courthouse, those near the windows in the first few floors, anyone in his path, maybe more, were all being cut down, possibly murdered by this man. I couldn't guess how far the projectiles went. For all I knew, they were going deep into the building. I don't know why I didn't try to run or hide. In hindsight, I could say maybe I just knew it would be futile. But at the time, that wasn't what I was thinking. I was scared, but more, I was angry, and I just wanted to stop him. He wasn't slowing the attack at all, and I realized he was enjoying it, enjoying the power, the fear, the death. His back was still to me, and I could see a spot right between where his shoulder blades had been and wings now were. Something was there, pulsing, almost like a human heart, but it didn't look like a heart. It resembled a small jellyfish, really. I tried to think of what I could use to stop this monster. It wasn't like they equipped marketing managers with Uzis. I didn't take my eyes off the pulsing thing on the man's back as I dug through my purse and my fingers found my weapon, my heavy, expensive Mont Blanc pen. It had been a gift from my father when I'd gotten a promotion at work. I doubted this was what he'd hoped I'd use it for, but I wasn't holding any other options. I dropped my purse, kicked off my heels, and ran straight for his back. He was moving closer to the courthouse, but was still less than 100 feet away from me. And back in school, I'd been on the track team. I was a sprinter and a hurdler, and some things don't leave you, even if you haven't done them for a while. Because he was a little taller than me, I knew I needed to be airborne when I hit him. I judged it and leaped at the last possible moment. My pen slammed into that jelly-like fish thing on his back just as he started to turn. I could see his eyes. They were wide, glowed red, and no longer looked human. As I drove the pen into his back, his mouth opened, but he didn't make a sound. His eyes, however, went back to human and glazed as I watched them die. Then his body fell forward and mine with it. I scrambled to my feet, covered with ooze from his wings and the exploded jellyfish thing. The police arrived. After all, many of them had been inside the courthouse. The scene was chaos. People were screaming. There was glass and blood everywhere, and I could hear sirens in the distance. But as I stared down at the dead body, all I could think about was whether I should retrieve my pen or not. A man appeared out of nowhere. He was over 6 feet, big and broad. I didn't register much else other than his suit, which I was pretty sure was Armani and looked excellent on him, meaning he probably wasn't with the police. My eyes were drawn back to my pen, still sticking out of the dead man's back. "How did you know what to do?" he asked without any opening formalities. "It just seemed right," I answered, winning the lame reply award of the hour. "Can I take my pen out?" He squatted down and examined the body. He pulled the pen out slowly. I got the impression he was ready to ram it back in if the body gave the slightest indication of coming back to life. I saw his eyes. They weren't normal, and then, as I killed him, they went back to human again. And I saw him die, I added. I wondered if I was going to have hysterics and realized I wasn't. I was somewhat relieved. The man looked up at me. I registered his face now. Rather broad features, strong chin, light brown eyes, dark wavy hair. Handsome, definitely. I hated myself for it, but I looked immediately to his left hand. No ring. I looked right back at his face, but he'd noticed and grinned. Chef Martini, single, no current girlfriend. And you are? Wondering if I'm going to be arrested. I noted several of Pueblo Caliente's finest bearing down on us with determined attitudes. Martini stood up. I don't think so. He turned around. Our agency will handle it, gentlemen. Please perform crowd control. The cops all stopped and did what he said. No arguments, no issues. I felt nervous now, much more than I had before. He turned back to me. Let's go. As he said this, a large gray limo with tinted windows pulled up across the street. Martini took my arm and led me over. I need to get my car, I protested, and my shoes. I hopped from foot to foot. I contemplated standing on top of Martini's shoes, then figured the brevity of our relationship probably meant I shouldn't. Give me the keys, he said. I don't think so. I pulled my arm out of his grasp and managed to find a tiny patch of shade to stand on. What the hell is going on? An older man got out of the back of the limo. He was built like Martini, only at least 2 decades older. They didn't look related, but I was pretty sure they were in the same line of work, whatever that was. He gave me a long look. Give Jeffrey your car keys, please. You're wasting time, ours and yours. Then I get to sleep with the fishes? I asked with as much sarcasm as I could muster. He laughed. We're not the mob. We're an authorized world government agency. You can stay here and be questioned by the police for the death of that unfortunate, or you can come with us. You'll tell me what happened? I mean, what really happened? Yes. He moved aside and indicated the car's interior. We'll also help you get cleaned up and keep you out of the papers. Why? I didn't move toward the limo or to get my purse. He sighed. We need agents. Ours is a dangerous job. And it's a rare thing when a civilian not only has the courage to do what's needed, but also the natural instinct to know where and how to kill a super being. I felt a nudge, and as I looked around, Martini handed me my purse. He had my shoes as well. Pickpocketing part of the trade? I asked, tossed my car keys to another man who'd appeared out of pretty much nowhere. Same Armani-clad look, maybe a bit smaller in build, but still obviously one of the crew. I don't think I fit the agency's look, I added as I grabbed my shoes and put them back on. Martini grinned again. He had great teeth and a great smile. I was already disgusted with myself for looking for a wedding ring, and now, more that I was paying attention to his looks while I was possibly teetering on the edge of life or death. We can use some female intuition, Martini said. That's what it was, right? You didn't know what was going on, but you knew what to do. I shrugged. I have no idea. Can I have my pen back? Martini laughed. Only if you get into the car with us. He leaned down. And only if you tell me your name, he whispered in my ear. My knees went weak then. Somehow this made it all real, not something I'd wake up from in a moment. I felt myself blacking out, felt Martini catch me and lift me into his arms, and then nothing.
And that is Touched by an Alien, available wherever books are sold?
Yeah, Barnes & Noble, at pretty much every bookstore, Amazon. You can probably buy it directly from DAW or Penguin Random House, but it's everywhere.
Good.
Happily.
Yes, great. Thank you, Ginny. Okay, next up we have Jennifer R. Povey. Jennifer R. Povey writes everything from heroic fantasy to stories for analog. She is also an experienced designer of tabletop RPGs and a skilled moderator and panelist at conventions. Her website is www.jenniferrpovey.com.
And I am going to read from my most recent book, The Friar's Tale, a novel of Robin Hood. I do not believe this scene requires any explanation whatsoever. If anything, the village seemed worse on their return than when they had left. The dogs seemed thinner, and Tuck could hear a woman's sobs from a building nearby. It was not his business, but the temptation to go and comfort her was strong. What comfort could he give? Those sobs were of a woman who had lost a husband, or perhaps a child. More likely the latter. Children died all the time, especially when they did not get enough to eat. Robin glanced at him. Are things this bad everywhere? Bad, but not like this. Gisborne's not the only lord to empty his coffers for the Crusades, but from what I saw on the way here, he's one of the worst offenders. Most are at least making sure the peasantry have enough to grow next year's crop. Not for the sake of the peasants, mind, but for their own. Tuck wondered if Gisborne even planned on coming back, if he was not thinking of joining those who were carving out far larger holdings for themselves in the desert. Far larger, but not as pleasant. Then again, there was a wealth in silver and silk and spices out there, enough for the younger sons who had nothing to inherit. Nothing would satisfy the likes of Gisborne. At least the king went on crusade out of avoidance, not greed. Of course, then he demanded John send him funds, weapons, men, horses. They'd be better off as crowing horses from the Saracens. Gisborne is running things into the ground. That he is, Robin murmured, but here they come. Hoofbeats did indeed echo through what passed for a street. Robin and Tuck had positioned themselves at one side of the desultory village green. Even the tree at the centre of it seemed tired and ran. The knights who rode in were well equipped and well mounted, better than Tuck had expected. He had thought the sheriff would use his dregs to quell people such as this, and then he realised Gisborne himself rode with them, on a fine palfrey. A dog padded over towards them, thin and with visible teats. One of the knights dropped his lance butt next to her, and she yelped and trotted away. At least he had not actually hit the creature. Tuck gave him a few points for that. A man who would beat animals was one step from beating, say, his wife. He thought with amusement about what would happen if someone tried to beat Clorinda. Of course, a lot of people felt a man had a right to beat his wife. She was only a woman. 3 women, speaking of that, came out of one of the houses. Where are your menfolk? "In the field, sir," one of them said, dropping a relatively neat curtsy. It was Gisborne himself who spoke, his dark Norman features seeming to darken further as he regarded the woman. "Ah, yes. Well then, I will just have to deal with you. You have not paid the levy." The woman made frightened gestures towards the village. "We don't have it, my lord." "We'll see about that." He would take it in whatever coin he could find, Tuck knew. He felt his hands tighten on his staff. It seemed that every day something happened to make him more and more angry with these people. What happened to Christian charity? The woman's face was thin and drawn, and so pale she looked like a great lady who never stepped outside, not a peasant. She was perhaps afraid they would take coin in the form of her and her body. He had heard of that happening. Rare, but it occurred. Of course, it occurred far more in the Holy Land, where the woman might, after all, get a child of Christendom out of the deal. Of course, nobody asked the woman what she thought about it. Gisborne was ordering his men to dismount and secure their horses. They would take anything of value, leaving these people with nothing. Tuck had seen it before. The difference was that this time he did not plan on standing and watching. Wait, though. Wait until yes, one of them was pushing past the woman into her house. She made a token effort to stop him, not wanting the contents of her pantry to be ravaged. Another was coming right towards Tuck and Robin. "A friar, eh? You are free to go, but your friend must remain." Levy would be taken in labour too. Labour, of course, that the village needed itself, and it was not as if they would be fed. Supposedly they were paying for Gisborne's protection. Who would protect them from Gisborne? The king, but John did nothing, seldom left his castle, and Richard would likely never set foot on England's turf again. "I'm not leaving." "Suit yourself," the soldier said, stepping towards Robin. "Can you shoot, yeoman?" A light came into Robin's eyes. "I would bet I can shoot better than your commander." Tuck hid a smile. It was likely true. If he meant Gisborne, then he was probably hopeless. If he meant the actual guard commander, then it was still quite likely Clorinda could beat them in a fair contest, let alone Robin. "Ah, and what would you bet?" "If I win, you take no levy here. Honestly, what do these people have?" "If you win, then the levy includes my service for a year." Gisborne stepped over. He had overheard. "This peasant thinks he can beat." "I think I can beat every man you have brought with you in fair trial. Standard distance and target." Gisborne looked at Robin and laughed. "Well, perhaps he will be good enough to be useful, and we are not even getting entertainment here." Tuck let out a breath. If he had to rescue Robin because of this stunt, when they had enough men hidden to rob Gisborne back, well, that also meant they had enough men hidden to Welsh on the bet if needed. The men were already moving to set up a target on the rather sorry green. Villagers poured out of their houses. They might be on the verge of losing whatever they had left and starving until the crops came in, but this was still entertainment. Robin blew on his arrows. "You had better know what you were doing, my friend." The first of the men was beaten easily, his arrow barely resting in the target. Robin put one in an inner ring over and over until only Gisborne himself was left. "Win or lose, it seems." "I beat your men," Robin smiled. "You have to beat all of us." A nasty murmur went through the village. That had not quite been the terms, and they knew it. Robin simply smiled and shrugged. Gisborne picked up his bow, lifted it, and fired. In an instant, Tuck realized he had misjudged the man. It was a perfect shot. Allowing for all of the wind and all of the air, and the arrow sailing through the air to strike the very center of the target, he lowered his bow. "Are you even going to bother to shoot, peasant? You can make no better shot." Tuck let only a small frown show on his features, but Robin actually winked at him. Then he lifted his bow, drew, knocked and fired in one smooth motion as if he were hunting deer. The arrow flew, twisting in the air a little, and it struck home. It struck the very shaft of Gisborne's arrow, splitting it. I would call that a better shot.
Thank you, Jennifer. And where can people find that book?
You can find it wherever ebooks are sold, and you can also get the paperback online through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and from me if there are ever cons again.
Yeah, we keep hoping. We keep hoping.
Next year sometime.
Yes. Okay. I'm reading last. And as I said, my name is Jean Marie Ward. I write fiction, nonfiction, and everything in between. My credits include a multi-award nominated novel, numerous short stories, and 2 popular art books. I was the former editor of CrescentBlues.com, and currently I'm a frequent contributor to BuzzyMag.com. My website is JeanMarieWard.com. I lack in imagination. Today, I will be reading something called Kings of Death. Unlike the other stories you've heard here today, Kings of Death is not yet published. It is scheduled for publication sometime in 2021. It will be the second in the Capital Magic series published by Falstaff Books. So you're getting something nobody else has heard quite yet. Kings of Death. Tall, lean, and lithe, the sorcerer Valentine Ross looked good in a tux, damn him. But he hadn't come to the Library of Congress's Jefferson Building to party. He marched across the inlaid marble floor of the Great Hall without greeting a soul. Up the Grand North Staircase he charged. He veered left at the top, away from the creaky string quartet and noisy, crowded bar, striding past the mezzanine's gleaming white columns like a leopard through savanna grass. Wow. My sister Gabriella purred approvingly in my ear. Anyone I know? I whirled. If my party dress hadn't been so tight, I would have dropped into a fighting crouch right in front of the buffet tables lining the mezzanine's west wall. A faint smile played over her generous mouth. As usual, she had calculated my reaction to the millimeter. The beaded tassel of my vintage cocktail bag whipped past the champagne flute in her hand without disturbing a single bubble. She offered me the glass. I shook my head. Sorry, Gabs. There's something I need to check. Go get him, reporter girl. The bar is open till midnight. Gabs should know. She was one of the sponsors of the after-hour reception, a title which didn't come cheap. The venue alone cost more than most library staff made in a year. But Gabs has mad math skills, which she began applying to the stock market in high school. I don't. Hello. I'm Rafaela Ortiz, the Ortiz family's designated screw-up. Our oldest sister, Mike, is a 32-year-old Army major, promotable, on the fast track to general stars, plural. Middle sister Gabs, who you just met, is an investment whiz and patron of worthy causes. I was fired from my first on-air job with the Sun television network affiliate in Madison, Wisconsin, for reasons I'm rather proud of. Now I scramble to meet my quota of news and human interest stories as the lone salaried reporter of DC Ogler, a hybrid web daily print weekly specializing in grocery ads and news to use for the people who actually live in DC. But my editor loves a scoop as much as the next news hound. Which brings me back to the ginger-haired sorcerer crossing the Jefferson Building's over-the-top Beaux-Arts mezzanine. Valentine Ross made news. He usually dodged the headlines, but I'd seen him make them happen. The first time we met, we brought down a congressman. The last time, I socked him in the jaw. I'm not sorry about that either. I still hadn't forgiven him for showing me magic was real, but I was willing to overlook it in the interest of discovering what a liturgical art restorer and self-described thaumaturge was doing at a pricey fundraiser for the Library of Congress. One of the biggest things Hollywood gets wrong about Washington is the way it glamorizes the players. The women are sharp. They have to be. The cliche about needing to be twice as good to get half as far remains all too true. Looks and presentation are important elements of the toolkit. The men, on the other hand, sport stained ties, grabby hands, and cheap suits designed to dupe the voters back home into thinking they're just folks. Outside campaign ads, their faces are porcine, weaselly, or an alarming combination of both. So even locked on my current sorcerer interception course, I was bound to notice the only other guy in range who could have come from Central Casting. He topped 6 feet, with pewter-frosted hair at odds with an unlined face as blandly perfect as any depicted in the library's murals. The suit was store-bought, no hand-rolled lapels or real buttonholes on the sleeves, but it was good quality wool, properly fit, emphasizing his superhero shoulders, flat stomach, and long legs. He was also watching Val as closely as I was. Just my luck. Central Casting batted for the other team. Val ducked into the Exploring the Early Americas exhibit in the northwest corner of the mezzanine. Central Casting allowed himself to be distracted by a 1%er congressman in a much cheaper suit. I followed Val, making sure I smiled at the entrance guard in case I needed to do something the sorcerer would regret. A faint trail of frankincense and turpentine led me to the second wood-framed glass cabinet on the left. Val scowled at its contents, hands clasped behind his back. Keeping his distance was smart. The library had recently rearranged the items in the case to make room for a 20-inch long, 4-panel fragment of Mayan codex. The codex was possibly the single most valuable item in the entire exhibit. Before its discovery under the end papers of a late 16th century life of Cortez, there were only 4 pre-Columbian Mayan codices in the world. Its acquisition by the library, courtesy of an anonymous donor with deeper pockets than most first world countries, subsequent conservation and display provided the pretext for tonight's party. An exclusive preview of a Mayan artifact might be a big deal in some circles, but not in Washington, D.C. Apart from the guard, Val and I had the room to ourselves. He glanced at me. He wasn't wearing his glasses. My stomach knotted at the sight of his naked, almost handsome face, a sensation that was composed of 1 part excitement and 2 parts dread. "It's fake," he said. And if you want to find out what's going to happen next, I'm afraid you're going to have to wait. But you have more than enough wonderful reading material to keep you busy until then. So with that, I will thank you, our participants, Jason, Alledria, Gini, and Jennifer, for joining us for this episode of Short Takes. And thank you there in the audience. If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave a review. Thanks again, and good night.